Hey everyone, welcome to our very first episode of this podcast, Inside Country Day Athletics. I'm joined by head coach of Country Day's Varsity Football program, Dan MacLean. My name is Luca Nowinski, and this is going to be really a great episode, kind of recapping how this football team has done so far this season. We're about at that midpoint 2-2 record. And we've really got a great game here, homecoming against Notre Dame Prep on Saturday at home. Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure, Luca. Thank you for doing this.
So let's talk a little bit about the preseason and how you've kind of led your team up to getting ready for the regular season starting in August. And something that I think is really unique that the football team does, and a lot of people on Country Day's campus know about this, is Camp Happy. Can you tell me a little bit about the tradition of that, how long it's been going on, and kind of what experiences you think it brings to these players as you ramp up into the regular season for football?
Well, it's happened almost every year of my 40 years of coaching at Detroit Country Day. It was at a couple different locations prior to, but the last 30 years it's been at Camp Happy, which is actually called the Leland Outdoor Center on the shores of Lake Michigan. It's a really beautiful camp. And I think it's become somewhat of an institution here at Country Day from the sense that it marks the start of the season. It is also a time where, we normally have quite a few guys. Of course, as they go through their classes, they get to know their classmates better. But particularly entering freshmen, they don't really know the people who are going to be on this trip with them and also going to be living in cabins with them for the next 4 days. And my perspective is that they form friendships that last them. Like I say, I've been here 40 years that seem to last forever. It's just been a wonderful thing. We can have a really great season or a not so good season, but the seniors at the banquet invariably talk about their time at Camp Happy and what it meant to them and how they met guys that they probably wouldn't have met otherwise. And it's just, got a tradition all its own.
Something unique about Country Day, too, in its own right, is that most of these kids don't know each other a whole lot before they enter their high school experience. And, people coming from all different places around the state of Michigan, even outside of the state of Michigan, and coming in and creating that bond before school even starts really must help a lot with building that team chemistry, but also walking around the hallways and being a Country Day student.
Absolutely. I think that particularly for freshmen, who are even coming from the middle school, our own Country Day middle school, but particularly those who are entering the school at the ninth grade level. And right away, you get to meet people in a different format than what you're actually going to go to school and attend. And so I think the relationships are formed a little easier. And, I've seen some bonds that are just unbreakable going forward. And guys have become best friends with that being the starting point in their Country Day lives. I know I had 3 sons who played in it, and they came from another school, and it was terrific for them.
Can you tell me a little bit too about this particular year's installment of Camp Happy and kind of what the team had to deal with in their experiences there? What kind of maybe other distractions there were. Obviously, it's not in a school setting. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, Camp Happy has gotten very popular, and with the later start this year of our football season, we had a lot of particularly cross-country camps. Country Day's own camp always goes up there, and that's never an issue, but it was really busy, and the food service was really, much more of a it took a lot more time. And so, the kids had to be patient. All the players had to be more patient. They weren't the only, game in town, so to speak. And it went from more of it seemed like more bounteous food to a little bit more like fast food and a big line out the door and that type of thing. And we talked about it beforehand. So we always talk about handling adversity in the proper way. Not that that was anything terrible, but I think it teaches you how to be, thoughtful and considerate. And one of our MOs up there is always, we reset the tables in the lunchroom. We sweep the floors. We have a community bath and shower. And so that's part of the cleanup as well. So those are all kind of good lessons that, help you if you haven't been exposed to that type of thing before. But it's the camp itself is just, like I say, it's a cornerstone of the foundation of Detroit Country Day football and has been for a very long time.
Now let's go into the regular season and into the first game where the Yellowjackets opened their season against Portland, who is one of the top teams in Division IV and has been for the past few years now. Tell me a little bit about the unique challenges about Portland, specifically with their offense and what they brought to the table that the Country Day defense had to handle.
Yeah, they run what we call a system offense. In other words, it's very clearly defined for their players, and it's, there's a lot to it, but once you get it down and the discipline of, executing that offense makes it very difficult for their opponents. Particularly, you don't see this kind of offense on a regular basis, and it forces you to play assignment football. They're very good at kind of probing your defense and seeing where your weaknesses are. And I thought early on that was an issue in the game, and I thought in the middle we kind of settled in, but then we had some unfortunate self-inflicted wounds, turnovers, and things that hurt us. I thought we played very hard and very competitively against a very good team.
Yeah, and especially you mentioned kind of those middle two quarters really felt like this was an even matchup of strong opponents at the top of Michigan football. And it really felt like this was a game that, you see two very completely different styles of teams, but the physicality and the challenge that it had to be for the Country Day defense and also really the offensive line to match that physicality, and they stood up to the test for the most part, outside of, like you said, a few self-inflicted wounds that really made the difference. Final score of that game was 39-25, but I would argue, and I think, you would kind of feel the same way, that the game felt a lot closer than the final score indicated.
Yeah. You take away those two turnovers, which led to easy scores. The one was a block punt in our first possession that got them on our own 5-yard line, and we had a good stand for a couple of plays, but they were able to inch it down and score. And then when the game was, the difference was a couple of extra points that we didn't convert on. 27-25 in the fourth quarter, we had an interception return for touchdown, and that just really kind of seemed to take the wind out of our sails. But there was a point, and I agree with you, that we were, I thought, starting to take over the game and, kind of asserting our will against a very good team. Good or bad, when they were having some issues stopping us, they still play extremely hard. They play as a team. They tackle, they run and hit, and they block very well. So fundamentally, they were a very good test for us. I was hopeful we could come out of there with a W, obviously, but I thought all in all a very good game and a really tough opener.
And even with a loss, tell me a little bit about having a tough opponent on your schedule like that for the very first game of the season. School hasn't even started yet. What does that kind of tell you about your team moving forward, and how does that kind of help you figure out the rest of the season?
Well, it's one of the things we think about. We kind of like to have a game that's a challenging game. I would love to have a W, but it just forces you to, you have time. You have the luxury of time in that we're not attending class, and you can put the time in and do that. And we very honestly, we challenged our team, and I thought they responded well. We probably threw the ball a little more than I would have wanted to. I'd like to have seen us run it a little better at times. But all in all, it was a good opener, and it's the type of game that hopefully you qualify for the playoffs and you're better for faced a team like that, because those are similar to the types of teams that you eventually will see in the playoff tournament.
So the second game of the season, still at home here, was against University Liggett. Country Day came out with a win, 44-7. This was a rivalry game in the past, kind of been stopped for the past 30 or so years. I think the last time these two teams played in football was 1991. Can you tell me a little bit about... So the second game of the season was a home game against University Liggett. Country Day coming out on top 44-7. This has been a rivalry game in the past. Two teams haven't played since 1991, but this is a series with a lot of history, a really cool trophy. What do you think it means for a rivalry game, even if it's been a while since the series has taken place?
I think those rivalry games have a special meaning in the sense that they are, in this case, based on schools that have a similarity in that they're private schools. And, I think much more competitive when we were a smaller school. We've kind of grown out of, their classification. It was nice. They approached us and really were excited about it and excited about the trophy. And I think they had some explosive players that they were looking to feature. For them, I think they underwent like a coaching change right before the season. Their coach, who is an excellent coach, Kevin Glenn, who'd been at Catholic Central and other places, he went to UD to take the head coaching job there when their head coach moved on. And so this elevated a coach, an interim coach, Andre Rison, who's a former MSU great and pro football player. And so they came in, they were ready to go, but I thought we did a good job early of just being methodical and taking the ball down the field and scoring. We did, what was necessary in that game, and it was also somewhat of a challenge in the sense that our sophomore quarterback, James Terrain, was hurt that week, and so Dominic Cassisi had to step in at quarterback, and he was very effective and productive and, gives you another really good option there of a guy who's a senior and just, I think, gave us a lot of confidence. And another senior, our former quarterback, Chase Dawkins, had an outstanding game. So it was good. It's always good to get that, win under your belt and to move forward. And that's exactly what we did. It was a very effective game.
And that was a game the Country Day offense really led by the run game. Chase Dawkins with 21 carries, 181 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Derek Williams adding 97 yards and a touchdown on his own. One thing I really want to talk about with this game, as week 1 we had James Terrain starting at quarterback, then week 2 with Dom Cassisi. What do each of those two guys kind of bring to the table in terms of leading this offense, and how do their skill sets kind of differ between them?
Yeah, I would say James is just got outstanding potentials, has a terrific arm, and that was the issue. He kind of nicked up his shoulder, but he's got a tremendous potential, and in the opener he threw several terrific balls and had good accuracy and executed very well. So that, I think, is something that will just continue to get better with time, particularly if we can run the ball effectively like we did against Liggett. Dom gives you an added dimension. He is more of he's a field general. He was a quarterback in his freshman year at Oxford, where he transferred in from. And he's just a natural leader. And he also gives us a little more of the element where the quarterback can put the ball under his arm and run. So they're different in that respect, and it's a nice option to have, as well as our former quarterback sitting at tailback there. That's always something good to have in the event that you ever need to pull a little trick out of your hat or something like that. So those are good. Those are good issues. Those are good things to have on your team.
And tell me a little bit about Dom Cassisi playing both ways. He plays a lot at linebacker on the Country Day defense, and you described him to me earlier on as a Country Day player.
Yeah.
What defines a Yellow Jacket, and how does Dom Cassisi really embody that role on this team?
So I use that terminology because I think more than anything, it's not that they're all alike. It's more that they're willing to do whatever is necessary to help their team achieve and become victorious. So they get the job done. And Dom is a legacy. His father, Joe, played on one of our very best teams ever, a state championship team, was a captain. And I see a lot of those qualities in Dominic. He's just one of those guys who he doesn't want to see anything bad happen to his team. So he just tries incredibly hard no matter what he's doing. And that kind of effort and focus and intensity has great value to a team. And when other guys can see that, what he's willing to do, then it makes it easier for them to kind of, football's a hard game in many cases, but it gives them some impetus to push through that difficulty. And Dom's been doing a very good job of that, and I'm very proud of him as well as all of our seniors.
And that brings us right into week 3, the home game against Loyola. Country Day coming out on top 42-18. And continuing with the conversation about Dom Cassisi, he was 8 for 12 for 119 yards and a passing touchdown in that game against Loyola. How did you kind of see the progression from week 2 to week 3 for him, and kind of opening up the passing game a little bit more, giving him some more flexibility to kind of do his thing from behind center?
I think coaches, the offensive coaches, Coach Wilson, who's our offensive coordinator, Coach Akins, who directs our passing game, and Coach Gonsorek, man, they all have a role. But I think they gave Dom a little bit more of a menu. They felt more comfortable. He got some more practice time under his belt, as well as the previous week's game. And they felt like he could do a little bit more. And he actually, threw the ball very effectively, as the stats belie. He's one of those guys. He's just going to come in and prepare himself and get himself ready and do whatever he can, as I said. And I think his performance in that game proved that out. The other thing is Dom doesn't want to come off the field on a defensive side too, because he provides that same kind of leadership to our defensive group. He's one of those guys who thinks the game very well. He has good instincts for the game of football, which is invaluable to our team. So, no, he's definitely a very key factor.
The other thing that really stood out to me from this Loyola game was the ground game, and we had Chase Dawkins with 108 yards, 3 touchdowns, Derek Williams adding 71 yards and 2 touchdowns of his own. Tell me a little bit about this two-headed monster running back and what each of those two guys brings to the table and how they complement each other.
Yeah, great problem to have, and very difficult, as I've kind of been a defensive coordinator more of my time here at Country Day. That really provides problems for a defense, and they complement each other very well. They're different kinds of runners, but just so effective. And I think at times, we like having them both on the field together, but it's nice because they both play key defensive roles, and they can spell each other at the offensive back position, and we don't lose anything in terms of production. They get in the end zone, they eat up the yardage, and when you can run the ball, you can possess the ball, take time off the clock. I always say it's the best form of defense when your offense is on the field, because the opposing team is sitting over there on their bench.
And one thing that we've talked about a lot on the live broadcasts of the Country Day football games is really how you have one of the two running backs really take a large portion of the beginning of this drive, get the team down the field close to the red zone. You bring a fresh set of legs in, and they finish the job. That's been something that's really stood out to us so far, and it's been really cool to see kind of them complement each other. When one gets tired, the other one comes in and picks up right where he left off and go even further.
Yeah, that's great. And as I said, it's really trying on a defense because there's no letdown. Both of those guys have really worked hard in the offseason to get themselves in great shape. They're both, fantastic guys in the weight room, and then, when we condition, and it's paid off. And, also just tremendous teammates.
And that leads us into the Week 4 game, first game on the road for the Yellowjackets against Divine Child. Now, Country Day did take a loss there, 23-6. First thing I want to talk about with Divine Child was we did have James Terrain back in at quarterback. How do you kind of evaluate the way he played and the way that this offense played? I know one of the things you mentioned earlier against Portland was he threw the ball too much, and that might have created some issues there with less balance in the offense. Can you just evaluate that performance for me a little bit?
Yeah, I think it was more of the same, and it's not a reflection on James. It's that we didn't run the ball as effectively as we would have liked. And that said, we still had plenty of opportunities. We had 4 times in the red zone where we didn't, score a touchdown. And usually that's an indicator that, you're just not productive where you need to be productive. You can run the ball between the 20s and the 10s. But when it comes down to asserting your will and getting the ball in the end zone, that was definitely a disappointment. And I think, in fairness, James had a little rust, but a good team. They had a good defensive scheme, and then, combined again with self-inflicted wounds, we had opportunities, and we had MAs, missed assignments, and things like that at just terribly crucial times. And I think, our defense played very well again, but, was out on the field a little bit too much late in the game. And we turned it over deep in our own end again. And, all those things it's just tough to win when you can't convert on those opportunities, and then you make mistakes and your defense is forced to go out on the field. Everybody, a lot of those guys are playing both sides of the ball, and I don't know that necessarily they hang their head, but it is a little bit discouraging. And I thought, again, really great effort. The game was 6-6 at half. We gave up a trick play for them to score in the first half. We otherwise really shut them down. Just a come out of there without a more satisfactory result was disappointing. And so we're hoping to right the ship this week.
Yeah, so now Country Day Yellowjackets 2-2 at about the halfway point of this season. Looking at the MHSAA Division 5 standings, first team out of the playoffs if the season ended today. Now, we go into this week, Saturday homecoming game, big chance for this team to really prove what they can do against arguably the top team in Division 5 right now against Notre Dame Prep. Tell me a little bit about what the Fighting Irish bring to the table in terms of their style on offense and kind of how this Country Day team is going to be able to combat that a little bit.
Yeah, they are a very well-coached team, well-prepared team. They make you defend the whole field. They have excellent speed on their team. Their quarterback is very good at, they get into open areas of the field and they sit down and they kind of use their passing game as, I always say it's kind of like a long handoff. They're very safe throws and they're able to kind of matriculate the ball down the field, and you have to have a lot of patience, and you got to have some people making plays, and then they can they have some explosion because they have some players on the other side of the ball who have good speed. It's been a really good rivalry. We've till last year we kind of had the upper hand, but the games were always very competitive. And so I'm hopeful and expecting that it'll be another game like that tomorrow, and hopefully the Yellowjackets can come out on top.
Absolutely. Something else that we've talked about in this episode is the importance of discipline for this Country Day team and avoiding missed assignments and things like that. How important is that going to be this week against Notre Dame, against a team with such a high-powered offense that can really hurt you?
I think it's extremely important. It's typically the team that makes the fewest mistakes that win, not always. And then, I think as we talked about coming off the Divine Child game, when you have opportunities, you have to convert. You have to take advantage. And I have a lot of confidence in our team. I know that we've played hard, extremely hard in all these games, but we have to be successful in finishing drives and coming up with points, and then get in there and settle in against a very good team who runs what we call a tempo offense, and they will adjust and they'll scan and they'll check out your defensive scheme to kind of probe for weaknesses again. It's a very sophisticated and good offensive system, and it will challenge us as a team, and I'm just hopeful that we're up for the challenge. It's getting to be the point in the season, as you mentioned earlier, where we have to kind of start notching some things in the win column because, as you said, the playoff system is a point system as well as wins. We do have the fortune of a very difficult schedule because strength of schedule does figure into the playoff picture, but at the same time, you want to go out on the field and win the game.
Yeah, so game against Notre Dame Prep, homecoming, big weekend for the student body here at Country Day and also for alums that are coming back. It's sure to be a great game, very entertaining to watch. If you can't make it, be sure to tune in to live streaming all Country Day home games this year. Thank you for coming on the podcast here. Great first episode. Amazing to hear kind of your insight on how this season's gone so far for you and kind of what you're looking for in the future. And I can't wait to have you on again and continue this discussion.
Well, the feeling is mutual. I can't tell you. This is really outstanding for Country Day, but I just can't thank you enough for the great job that you're doing in getting this all off the ground and continue. It's wonderful. Thank you.